Welcome back to What's on My Needles, and this time it is time for a new project. And this project is going to be what I call a butterfly shawl. I have yet to find the official name for them. It's one that will come up over my shoulders and cross all the way over in the front. So there'll be a little bit that goes over that shoulder and a little bit that goes over that shoulder. I'm doing this by making increases along 7 different cables around the shawl. I'm hoping that it will be relatively tight to my neck, so about where my t-shirt is right now. I can obviously cinch it up a little bit closer if it is actually ever cold here. For those of you who don't remember, I'm in California. It doesn't get cold here. And then going about 12 inches down, which happens to land right around my elbows. So when I did the math and played with the yarn a little bit, and by the way, it is this gorgeous yarn. This is donated yarn yet again. The location that this was donated to couldn't use the metallic fiber in it. Therefore, I get to have it in exchange for me giving them a little bit of money. So yes, I technically bought it, but it's still donated because I didn't have to go to a store to get it. I have 2 skeins of this. The hope is that I can make the entire shawl out of one, and if that's possible, I might add something to the shawl at the very end. So we will see. So when I did the gauge swatch of this with the stitch pattern that I'm doing, it came out a little funny, but it's working out that I will need to do increases about every 4 rows to have it drape nicely. I am doing 3 different cables, so let me get everything set up and I will show you how that works. So before I can actually start on the center cable, I need to add enough stitches in order to make that cable work. So the rest of them I'm just doing 2/2 kind of standard cables. For this one I'm going to do what I call a helix cable. So I need to increase 4 stitches. So I'm doing a right leaning lifted increase. I'm knitting into the stitch. Then I'm going to do a right leaning lifted increase, but purlwise. Then I'm going to do the same thing in reverse. So a lifted left leaning increase purlwise and a left leaning knitwise. So I will now work the rest of the way back. I will be using a bobby pin as my cable needle, and the stitch markers in this case are just denoting where the cables are until it's more well established. So here I am back to that same center cable section just from the front and a couple stitches before. So this was my first increase row, so I'm knitting over and then I'm doing a lifted left leaning increase, so inserting into the stitch below and then knitting into it. So as said, this back cable is going to be a helix, so I'm going to purl 2, trying really hard not to twist these stitches, which is kind of hard for the first row when after they've been picked up. I'm going to pop my bobby pin out. You can do this with a knitting needle. I choose not to, or a true cable needle, which I also choose not to. So I'm just holding it to the front. I'm knitting the next 2 stitches and then slipping those 2 stitches back. I'm going to put the bobby pin back in the hem of or in the neck edge of the shawl. And then I knit them off. Then I'm going to purl the next 2. Slip my marker over, pick up so not the stitch on the needle, but the one underneath it, and knit into there, and then knit the stitch on the needle. And I'm going to keep going. this pattern, or the stitch pattern that's going on, is a knit purl pattern, where all of the work is done on the purl side. So I will actually show that in a different video because it's going to be in another project coming up soon. But that is the first part of that cable. I will be back in a couple rounds to show a little bit more of how this cable and these other cables are working and how this is getting bigger. Be back in a minute. So here we are to some more of the cabling stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and knit that last stitch before I get to the cable. Got my bobby pin, picking up the 2 stitches, putting them behind, knitting the 2 off of the left hand needle, and then putting the 2 from the bobby pin back on the right hand side and knitting those 2 again. Okay, now I'm going to knit all the way across the next marker. Oops. So for those of you who don't actually knit that much, that's called yarn barf. That's because I'm doing this as a center pull ball, and that is one of the downsides of center pull balls. I don't do it all that often, but yeah, it happens. We're just going to keep going. So the whole reason I stopped at this row to show you what I'm doing is because this is where it's a little bit different. So I'm going to purl 1, again, bobby pin, I'm going to slip the next purl stitch on, knit 2, and then slip the bobby pin, or slip the stitch off the bobby pin and purl it. Slip those 2 stitches on, purl 1 stitch, and then knit the 2 off the bobby pin. And then purl the last stitch. Okay. And now there's only one more little cable to do, and it's the one all the way at the end, or it's the other side. And that one is the exact same as the first one, just in reverse. So instead of putting the stitches to the front, I'm going to be putting the stitches to the back. So I'm going to keep working like this for quite a while. So this is actually the end of this video, and I will see you next week on what's on my needles. So I thought the first video on this shawl was done. And so it's been about a week since I started it, and I went to test fit with where it is, and that cable and that cable are supposed to be able to sit on my shoulders given the angle, and they don't. So I need to put the project in timeout, which also means I'm going to end up ripping out almost all of it, if not all of it. So I will be back next week or next time, and we will see where this is sitting at that point in time and how much I'm still mad at it. So sorry for not having a more uplifting end, but that's part of what happens when you're crafting and when you're making and designing, is sometimes things don't work. So this is the realistic view, and I will see you next time.